Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
So you got, is that your Nancy Pelosi doll, Mickey?
It is. And what's that she has in her hand, Bob?
It's kind of a small doll, but is that a whip? I don't know.
It could be a whip or it could
Am
be
I reading too much?
Could be
into
split
this?
reins.
Split reins, the kind that are used to treat migrants harshly at the border? What is this a reference to?
Well, it's a double reference, Bob. It's a reference to the border, and it's also she's whipping the votes in the House, obviously. Duh.
Wow. You know, you ask, what do people get if they tune in and listen to us? And right there you have it. It's
this
like
is a
just
this is a
works
powerful
of
image,
creative
Bob.
genius.
And also, she's promised that there's a framework, and I have a framework, too, as you could see.
Yeah, that's a frame. That's a frame. It's a kind of a big frame for a doll that size, but
it's empty, which many people think that Pelosi's framework is. The weird thing about this infrastructure bill, which is sort of coming to a head now, so I think I'm allowed to talk about it for a minute, is, the moderates forced her to do this deadline where you vote on the small bill that everyone likes on Monday, Monday.
The bipartisan hard infrastructure bill.
Right. And then the soft, squishy, bloated,
3.5
liberal wish list bill.
Yeah.
Sorry?
$3.5 trillion bill, but just to interject, isn't that a little more to your liking than it used to be now that, as I understand it, the House parliamentarian or somebody has ruled that you can't include amnesty in it?
Yes, there are two big things I'm worried about in the bill.
The other one being helping poor people with children. Am I right?
The other one being sending checks to mothers who don't work and parents who don't work and recreating the underclass. So yes, that's still in there, but the immigration thing appears to be out. They're going to make another try at it. But there was an article in Vox about it, about how they can come back, and it wasn't very convincing.
Come back on amnesty?
Yeah, I mean they could propose a narrower provision, a narrower bill that maybe will meet with the parliamentarians' approval. Mm-hmm. There's some weird provision called the registry, which says that if you came before 1972, you're home free. You can become a citizen. Okay, I didn't even know that existed, but they can update that to 2020 and amnesty everybody practically. And the argument is if they then charge people $5,000 a head, they can claim it has a budgetary impact. I mean, it's probably not going to fly, but they're
Wait, they charge the immigrants?
Yeah.
Who have been here?
Yeah.
And it's like an amnesty fee.
Yeah. That's the proposal from this guy,
I would think
Leon
you'd be
Fresco,
in favor of that.
Who's the Svengali of Chuck Schumer. Well, they pay coyotes $10,000 or $20,000, so $5,000 doesn't seem to be prohibitive. But no, I'm not for it, obviously. Anyway, so my assumption was that Pelosi would, and the assumption of all these commentators who said, "Oh, this Monday deadline isn't important. Pelosi can get around it 100 different ways. The moderates want nothing." It turns out, surprisingly, she's honoring it. Suddenly, she claims she's going to have a vote on Monday on the small bill.
On the hard infrastructure.
And that may be because Manchin Sinema told Biden, if you don't vote on the small bill, I'm through with reconciliation. And if she really meant it, that's an ultimatum that carries some weight. Plus, Biden would like the small bill. So her new strategy, the problem with the small bill is then the progressives worry correctly that then the moderates will lose interest in the big bloated bill. So Pelosi's strategy is to pretend to also pass the big bloated bill next week, which nobody thinks she has time to do. But she's going to try to finesse it and say, oh, it's just around the corner, it's just around the corner. So the progressives won't vote against the small bill, so the small bill will pass. And then who the hell knows what happens. I assume that what she'll do is she will not send the small bill to Biden for his signature. She'll sit on it, just do nothing, and sort of hold it hostage until the big bloated bill passes. That seems to be her strategy, and as we know, she never fails, Bob. That's what everybody thinks.
Okay, so wait a second. I'm not sure I grasped all that, but I mean, on the one hand, you seem to think that once the hard bill passes, the Democrats are going to have trouble passing the soft bill. What, unless she plays hardball and refuses to send it to Biden? Is that it?
Well, that's part of it. And it's all weird because also as part of the agreement with the progressives, she said she would clear it with the Senate first. So she's really got to get Manchin and Sinema on board with the whole thing by next week. I don't think so. So
why is next week the deadline again?
Well, she just said she's going to bring it to the floor next week.
Well, what if she changes her mind and says it's the week after?
She'll change her mind. Most people think.
Well, then why are we even talking about that as if it's a deadline? I mean,
because she is promoting it as a way to con the progressives into voting for the small bill.
I see.
She's trying to say, don't worry, progressives, we'll do the big bill too. See, I'm doing it on Friday. It's just around the corner. It's all happening.
So these are progressives who originally said we're not voting on hard infrastructure unless there's a rock solid linkage to the soft infrastructure.
Right. And
they didn't get that.
The basic reality, I think, is if Pelosi really read the Progressives the Riot Act, enough of them would vote for it. But it's not clear that
now there's also the possibility that they don't. The progressives don't vote for it, but there are enough Republicans to vote for it. And I would think that's tempting for the Republicans. There's a lot of stuff in hard infrastructure you'd like to be able to take credit for before your voters. And if the Republicans, let me see if I have this right. If the Republicans, vote for hard infrastructure, does that give the moderate Democrats more leverage in negotiations over soft infrastructure? So that bill winds up being more to the liking of Republicans?
Yes.
Well, then why? Then I would think there's a lot of Republicans who would vote for hard infrastructure, and the progressives actually have very little leverage.
You would think, as Matt Iglesias said, they would totally own the libs if they all voted for it. But there are a couple of factors against it. One is Trump has stupidly said, I'm against it, so I order you to vote it down, and some people seem to be obeying him. Second, people like the National Review think that it would really, that if they don't vote for it, the whole thing might collapse and Biden will be humiliated. I don't think that'll happen. And they just don't want to help out Biden. So there's a divergence between what you want for the country, which is clearly to vote for it and water down the big bill, and what you want politically, which is to harm Biden. And
with all due respect, Mickey, with all due respect, that seemed like a pretty naive thing for you to say, that they're torn between the good of the country on the one hand. I mean, give me a fucking break. These people, it's total 100% self-interested calculation. These people are almost completely worthless public servants. What?
The National Review is a magazine of ideas, like the New Republic.
Oh, so they put it that way? They said the countries, they're torn between what's good for the country?
But they clearly would rather have a better big bloated bill than a worse big bloated bill.
Yeah, but that's not for the good of the country.
It isn't? I don't know. They profess to be idealistic. The problem is, from my point of view, I think it's best for the Republicans if they vote for the small bill, but I also think it's best for Pelosi. And since it's a zero-sum game, how can that be true?
Why is it good for Pelosi if you're saying if it's a narrower hard infrastructure bill or narrower soft infrastructure?
No, just to vote for the hard bill.
If it's a close vote.
Sorry?
You're saying if it's a close vote, that's good for Pelosi?
No, it's good to pass it. It's good to have a yes vote.
Yeah, it's good for her to pass it.
Because it gives Biden an accomplishment, and I think Biden, if that's all Biden gets, he's fine.
No,
he doesn't need the big bill.
Non-zero-sum games are totally possible here. All of these people have one thing in common. They are incumbents and want to get reelected. In fact, what they have to worry about, I think, eventually, if they keep demonstrating such, incapacity in terms of actually getting useful stuff done, is the lose-lose side of the non-zero-sum game, which is that eventually, someday, God willing, voters just say, screw all of you. We're voting all of you out of office, and whoever comes in next better get some shit done. This is ridiculous. I mean, do you realize, for example, right now, Biden, now this is a more partisan thing, but it's a good example of government, gridlock. He can't staff half of the State Department because Ted Cruz and maybe Josh Hawley has a hold on various people just out of spite. They're just crippling the Biden foreign policy apparatus because our government lets some asshole like Ted Cruz do that.
I assume that they have a reason for their spite, not that it justifies it. But
oh, yes, showing off, getting reelected. God, you're naive. You think Ted Cruz wants anything other than power, Mickey? His last moment of principle was at the Republican convention where he briefly stood up against Trumpism and he spent the next 4 years giving Trump oral sex. I mean, he is totally without principle.
I do think, I do think that the system is crazy, but usually there is a reason other than pure spite. But I'm not sure you're right about zero sum because both parties want power to enact their agenda, and that is a zero sum game. Isn't it possible? Just you tell me. You're the game theory expert here. Isn't it possible that if the Republicans realize, well, there's this, the risk averse thing is to pass the bill, and the Democrats realize the risk-averse thing is to pass the bill, it could be in both their interests if you take into account the probabilities of a risky good outcome and a risky bad outcome, that they're both being cautious.
I mean, you're right that there are all kinds of zero-sum dynamics here, but yeah, that is a non-zero-sum dynamic. They could all be right that they will be reelected by all doing the same thing.
No, but Pelosi does not care about being reelected. She wants to preserve power in the White House, and the Republicans don't care about being reelected. They also care about gaining power in the White House. It's not just reelection. You can't take that out. That doesn't get you out of the zero-sum problem.
Well, that's why it's complicated. There's a mixture of motives, but there's plenty of Republicans in the Congress who, forced to choose between staying in office and getting a Republican elected president next time, will choose to stay in office. There's a strong incentive to get reelected. That's not a radical statement from political science, just like kind of some news flash.
Yeah. Well, at this point, the Republicans are convinced they're going to retain power, so they want to retain the majority, but they don't necessarily care about ousting Biden. You're right at this point. So there's a very sort of, it's the piece you don't want to have written about you if you're president. Susan Glasser or Glazer in the New Yorker saying,
Glasser,
it's too early to throw Biden onto the ash heap of history. Well, I didn't realize that Biden was close to being thrown onto the ash heap of history. So if Susan Glazer is his biggest defending him against this, he's in trouble.
I mean, I can see him winning re-election with a bumper sticker that says "Not dead, Biden, not dead yet."
Yeah,
I can see that.
Yeah,
sure.
I only drool half the time. Yeah, that's something like that. But Glazer thinks, or whatever her name is, Glazer thinks that if Biden doesn't pass both bills, he's toast, and that's sort of the Democratic establishment view that it's so important that he be the new FDR with the great New Deal and the new Great Society. He has to pass both. And that's insane. He wasn't elected to be the new FDR. He was elected to not be Trump and be competent and maybe get something done. So if he gets just the little thing done and not the big bloated thing, he's fine. He'll be fine. I passed $1 trillion infrastructure bill. See, it was bipartisan. I said I'd be bipartisan. And the left is mad at me. So how left could I be? He'll be fine with just a little bill.
Yeah, I mean, it's true that unless you think he has to worry about nomination, I mean, within the party, the bill would really help in terms of intra-party support, and that matters in terms of turnout and stuff, I guess, in the general. But I think you're right that when he's running if he's running against Trump, he's probably, you're right. That it's not nearly as critical. Well, it's not as critical in the general as in gathering intra-party support. But, I mean, first of all, do you think the hard infrastructure, do you think the vote's going to happen and it's going to pass this Monday?
Well, she's obviously going to put off the vote as long as possible. So she'll put it off for a couple of days. She only said she'd start debate on Monday. She doesn't have to finish debate on Monday. So they vote Wednesday or Thursday.
And you think it'll pass? You think it'll pass?
Yes.
But with Democrats or with Republicans?
Well, they're going to get at least 10 Republicans, so it'll be a mixture.
But I mean, I guess the question is, will the progressives walk? We don't know how many progressives there are, but will AOC walk with some number of progressives and not vote
she'll walk,
for it?
but the question is how many walk. And, it'll be a question of it'll win by one vote. So they'll work it out so it wins by one vote. But I also think, but then I sort of think the larger bloated bill will be, still a mess. And it'll take a while, but I do think eventually they'll pass something, even if it's radically watered down.
Well, you would think it is in all of the Democrats' interest to pass something. But it's a game of chicken, it's in all of their interest probably to pass something on the soft infrastructure side. But they're going to be, not that I totally understand, what is the motivation of Joe Manchin and Sinema in playing hardball on whatever they're going to play hardball on? What are they going to play hardball on? What part of soft infrastructure are they going to want removed? The same thing you want removed? The
no,
child
unfortunately
tax
not.
credit?
Well, Biden, Manchin, yes. Manchin says he wants to work test the child tax credit, which is all I'm asking for. So that's great. We don't know if he's going to hew to that. He said in a recent interview, well, I want to work test everything, which is great. That's like my vision of the welfare state, right? It's all based on work. He wants to work test and means test it. He should be an honorary editor of the Washington Monthly. That's the Washington Monthly provision. Not coincidentally, Charlie Peters is from West Virginia, Bob. So that may be
he is the founding editor of the Washington Monthly.
Founding editor of the Washington Monthly. Anyway, Manchin has to get reelected in a very conservative state, so he has a legitimate reason. And also, you should never discount, although in Manchin's case it's hard to believe, the power of sincerity. He really thinks it's bad to add $3.5 trillion more dollars in spending to the economy. Sinema, I don't know that much about. Supposedly, she has been much more concrete and and less vague in her demands, but I don't know what the demands are. But means testing is clearly one of them. I mean, basically, the child tax credit, they so want it to be universal that they give it to people who are making like $100,000, $200,000. Okay, this basically welfare payments. They don't have to do that. They could cut it off at $50,000.
So she wants to means test that. That would be okay with me.
Yeah,
I mean, at some level, certainly at 100,000.
The important, I don't care that much about means testing. I'm for it for affordability reasons. Mm-hmm. But and what the main thing I want to control is the bottom end, not the top end. Means testing takes it away from the rich. I want to take it away from people who don't work at the bottom, the way it is now. So I want to keep the current provision, which is you have to have some taxable income, $2,000, $2,500 to get this money. And I want to keep that, and that's not really means testing. I don't think Sinema is for that, but Manchin is. So that's anyway, I don't quite know what Sinema's motive is. She's a bisexual triathlete. I don't know many of those. She's a black box as far as I'm concerned. People say, she's really, just doing it for show, and she's calculating, and I'm sure she is to a certain extent. But boy, has she performed so far well. I mean, she put together the bipartisan bill, and she's quietly holding up the bigger bill. So, but I don't know what motivates her.
I would expect a bisexual triathlete to be pretty formidable. I suspect, though, that bisexual triathletes have differing ideological views, so I'm not sure it would help if you already knew a couple of them in terms of fathoming her own political dispositions. So will all this stuff interact with this question of the debt ceiling extension or suspension, or is that a separate game of chicken between the two parties?
I think it's become a separate game of chicken. They could have. The Democrats could pass the debt. It looks like the extension is going to happen, so let's not worry about that. But the debt ceiling is the higher risk one, and the Democrats could put that in a reconciliation bill and pass it by themselves anytime they want. They could have put it in the big bloated bill, but of course the big bloated bill is going to take forever to pass, so that's too risky. Although I wonder why, that would be a must-pass provision, so they could say, God, we got to pass this thing, because otherwise we'll lose full faith and credit. But they can do a separate reconciliation bill, apparently. It's just a hassle, and it takes 2 weeks, and they have to have to votoramas where, people offer a lot of symbolic amendments, and it's just a pain in the ass. So and they didn't want to go through the pain in the ass, but now they're going to go through the pain in the ass.
So you're saying there will be an extension on the debt ceiling, but that's just temporary relief, and they will ultimately have to decide whether to raise it?
No, I think they'll extend it. No, if they're going to go through this by themselves, they're going to extend it far enough that they don't have to worry about it. And they may get rid of it altogether. That would be great.
It would be great. It's kind of silly.
Said, we don't have to get permission to raise the debt ceiling anymore.
Yeah.
So as long as they're doing it by themselves, they might as well do that unless they're going to lose members of their own caucus.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't understand is, I don't understand why there's any stigma in voting to raise the debt ceiling anymore. Everybody's for big spending. Except for Paul Ryan, both parties are for big spending. So are the voters going to punish somebody who votes for the debt ceiling? I don't think so.
So were you secretly or not so secretly gratified by seeing Biden get a taste of Trump's medicine in the form of, these pictures of migrants being treated harshly at the border and the White House getting blowback? And was that really a good moment for Mickey?
No, it was a terrible moment. I thought it was because he was getting unrelenting bad press for his fucking up this situation. And this gave the left a reason to get outraged and put pressure on him. And,
so you think it gave a bad name to treating migrants harshly?
Well, it was bogus because they didn't whip anybody. They didn't have whips. They had split reins, and the split reins were being used to guide their horses. But they did say nasty things to the migrants. This one guy said, what this one guy on horseback said to the migrants seems sort of outrageous and harsh.
What did he say?
He said, basically, you make your women do this, that's why you have a shithole country. So that didn't seem
honestly,
like
I would think that person should perhaps be subject to a performance review. I mean, if you're patrolling the border, you should really kind of keep your mouth shut about stuff like that.
They're all subject to performance review, and I assume that guy will get the.
But was there? How do you know? Was there video? I just saw one picture, and I didn't hear
video.
It. There is video?
I looked for the video this morning, and all I saw, you don't see anybody being whipped. The reins are in the air, so it looks like they could be whipping people, right. But they're whipping the horse. They're not whipping the people.
Well,
it's scary to have a horse bearing down on you, so you're going to be scared.
Yeah.
But you are not being whipped. One person, I think it was a young girl, falls down because the horse's muzzle hits it, not a whip. The horse is just turning around and her muzzle happens to hit this girl and she falls down. And then there's a guy who's being grabbed by the shirt, and supposedly he was trying to get control of the horse away from the border guard. So that's like grabbing a cop's gun. You're going to get grabbed by the shirt if you do that. So that seems to be what's going on, but it's inherently scary having these horses come down on you, yeah.
Yeah, when I saw only pictures, I wondered why there hadn't been video, but it sounds like maybe some of the pictures look a little more damning than the video looks, and that's why the pictures circulated through some channels.
Correct. But so it's a sideshow, and the real thing that if I were on the left, I'd be outraged, and they are outraged. Is he's pursued this sort of 2-track strategy, which is sort of kind of brilliant from his point of view, which is he deports a few hundred single men, mostly single men, back to Haiti, which is sort of shocking to them because they haven't been in Haiti for years. They left Haiti a decade ago, and they've been in Latin America working.
That is a deterrent, man.
And so they say, oh, well, there's a better deal in America. They come to America, and they get shipped back to the place they're trying to avoid. So that's pretty scary. Meanwhile, he's letting 2/3 of the people in, never to leave, mainly women with children, but he's counting on the impact of the 1/3 to send a deterrent message. And then what does he, and then he relies on Mexico to stop the future Haitians from coming. I don't think it's going to work because
why is Mexico incentivized to do that? Because they have to deal with shit on the border too while this is happening?
Mexico, they cooperate and they don't cooperate, and they basically decided we have too many Haitians in our country, and the whole reason for the crisis is they let them all go at once. Okay, they had bottled them up in the south of their country, and then they said, okay, you can all take buses to the border now. So all of a sudden, 10,000 Haitians turn up at the border. But there are more Haitians who want to come. There's another 10,000 on the way, supposedly. And, you know, if we can do things to Mexico that make them happy, like give them massive amounts of foreign aid, they will occasionally crack down. And they don't want Haitians constantly flowing through their country. They're sort of sick of people coming through their country. So that would be a reason to crack down. And so maybe that'll work. I don't think it'll work because the Haitians are very, very well informed, and they know that the women with children are getting through. So if you're a woman with a child, you say, well, Biden's not going to deport me to Haiti. He's going to let me in. The odds are good. They're 2 out of 3. So
but then the men quit accompanying them, presumably.
Yes, although if you're a man in a family unit, do you get deported? Now, I don't know. It's very random. It has a Kafkaesque element.
Well, that's what they want is random. I mean, that's the way to make it a deterrent, is for it to be random. That's
a good point. But there's some women with children who are clearly being deported. You see videos of them walking down the gangplank in Haiti. And so, you know, maybe there's some, you know, you're a little worried if you're a man with a family unit. I would be.
So what does all this mean for Biden? I mean, are you increasingly thinking, he has seemed, I mean, I haven't really tuned into a lot of what he's done lately, but he seems kind of to be all over the place. He seems vibrant. I mean, just to read the newspapers, he's showing up a lot and saying shit. I don't know how good a job he's doing saying it, especially when it's not in a script, but I find myself more and more thinking that he could run for re-election, which kind of concerns me. But are you getting this sense at all?
Well, the thing he does best is negotiate deals with senators. And he seems to have done that reasonably well. You didn't see he had a series of meetings on Wednesday, I believe, at the White House, maybe Thursday, with various politicians. And you didn't see him emerge from those meetings saying, well, he was really out of it. You heard him say, well, he played it very cagely. He asked us what our top line number was. And when that didn't work, he asked us what we really wanted. And if you added it added up to quite a high top line number. So he did that job very well and was clearly on the ball. And so, that goes with your theory that he's capable of fulfilling the duties of his office. On the other hand, he goes from pillar to post. He lets all these people in the country. Then all of a sudden he turns around and deports a third of them when it turns out, gee, there's a crisis. Who is he listening to? Who tells him he has to deport it? Was that Mayorkas' cynical advice, or did somebody in the White House get to him? The whole issue of the puppeteer, who is the person who is his Svengali, who is his Rasputin, who has his ear, it was brought to the fore by this sort of, this schizophrenia.
It's probably not any single person, assuming there's anybody who fits that description, right? I mean, unless it's Jill.
It's Jill or Nancy.
Nancy? No, Nancy can't be his all-purpose Svengali.
Why not? She has a telephone.
Jill wouldn't put up with it. Jill wouldn't put up with it.
Jill won't put it up from Kamala, because Kamala is the Eve Harrington.
You think Jill's fine with Joe being Nancy's slave?
No, Nancy just gives advice. You can't. Nancy's Speaker of the House. You can't.
Well, I'm sure he takes her advice on stuff like that. But if you're talking about a puppet master, which is, I think, the term you use, that's different.
Well, it'd be somebody who said, this border thing is out of control. You got to do something, Joe.
Yeah, but I just think there's different people on different issues. Probably.
That implies that he is the conductor of the orchestra and he puts all the pieces together. Could be.
Or that there are a lot of conductors. It's musical conductors, so to speak. So what else? He gave a General Assembly speech.
That's your bailiwick. What did you think of it?
Oh, I'm going to write something on this, I think, in my newsletter eventually. Not in today's, but I think it shows you what the problem is with his foreign policy. I mean, he basically said he wants to do three things, fight pandemics and fight, authoritarianism and, what was the third thing he wanted to fight? He wanted to fight something else. It'll come to me.
He wants to fight for a rules-based order.
No, it's not a rules-based order. It's all going to come back. But anyway, the problem, the third one is something that I applaud. It'll come to me as I speak. But the authority, I mean, the contradiction is when he says, we don't want a Cold War, but we do want to fight authoritarianism relentlessly. And, it's, there's just going to be too much tension there. I don't know. My big critique is a little subtler than that. But it has to do with the problems he's not even mentioning. Like the only arms control thing he mentions is nuclear arms. And that's yesteryear. It's fine to try to keep them under control, but there's all these emerging threats like, biological weapons that he's not even thinking about. And I think if he took those things seriously, then, he would realize that he can less afford to be putting so much emphasis on fighting authoritarianism. There's just going to be a trade-off between those things. In a way, there won't be a trade-off between fighting COVID and fighting authoritarianism. Oh, the other one is climate change. The third one is climate change. And similarly, there won't necessarily be such a huge trade-off, although there will be some, between fighting climate change and fighting authoritarianism.
I don't like the term Cold War, as you know. I think it's a case of people putting things in old boxes for rhetorical effect. Obviously, it's different from the Cold War because Russia wanted to bury us, and we weren't connected with Russia the way we're connected to China. So it's a different kind of containment. But the Biden strategy does seem to now be containment. There's a new book out by the guy who's, I think, running the Biden China policy, basically saying that Xi's drive for authority and world, he wants to be number one in the world. He doesn't want to bury us. He just wants to be number one. We get to be the beta male in the group, I guess. That isn't just Xi. It stems from decades of party doctrine, and there's no point. You can't hold out any hope that if Xi goes, that other people more moderate will take his place. That's just the way they are. So you have to contain them.
There's another possibility, which is that the more you try to contain them, the more appetite there will be for hardline leaders. And so you get more and more Xi-like. Now, he's probably going to be there for a while. But the point is that the more you try to contain them, the more nationalistic China gets. And the more you can expect their leader to play tough guy. That is at least a possibility.
This book by the Biden guy would suggest that we're stuck with it anyway, and there's no way they're not going to pursue this strategy, even if we don't try to contain them. So we might as well try to contain them.
Well, I mean,
and I guess the authoritarianism thing it could be seen as a guise to give a nice ideological patina to what really is. We don't want to be the beta male. We want to be the alpha male.
Right. I mean, it's great. It's competition between two great powers, a rising power and a power that in relative, global terms is declining in terms of its wealth as a fraction of global wealth. That's us. But, I think to a large extent that is what is going on. And I wouldn't be so quick to assume that China wants alpha status per se. I haven't seen signs that they want to encroach on, our territorial waters or anything, or challenge any of our vital interests.
They've made noises about being in Hawaii already.
Oh, give me a break. Being there and if so, they consider our being in like the South China Sea at least being there in certain capacities to be threatening, and they may make noises about Hawaii in that context. But I don't think. What, you think they're going to like try to invade Hawaii?
No, I agree that they don't. They don't pose that kind of threat. I don't think. The book is Rush Doshi's The Long Game: China's Grand Strategy to Displace American Order. So there.
Well, it depends what you mean by order. That's the whole question. I mean, at which there are a lot of rules they would be willing to abide by. And then there's a set of things that they consider intrusions on, in effect, their internal affairs, which they define more broadly than we do, to include, Taiwan and some islands in South China Sea.
They seem to take everything, to fit everything into this framework. There were some hilarious ones. They apparently held Facebook's decision to ban Donald Trump was not like good. The United States is moving our way in terms of internet censorship. It was, what a horrible sign of weakness in the American state that the American president can't even boss around Facebook the way we boss around our tech companies. So that was a sign of weakness. Everything is a sign of American weakness.
Who said that? I mean, she didn't say that.
Doshi, I think. I believe this book. It's there's a review in the Washington Post by John Pomfret, somebody named Pomfret. So John Pomfret. So it's all about the patches anyway, Bob. We know that.
Patches?
You wrote about patches.
Oh, the shoulder patches, yeah.
Not just the song.
Yeah, I was going to actually discuss that in the Parrot room. It's maybe a little arcane for this, but yeah, that was Monday's newsletter about I was wondering whether you would complain that I overplayed that. It was definitely worth bringing out.
It was, like I say, China glommed onto it. They glom on everything, so they glommed onto the patch.
And I acknowledge that possibility in the piece. We should might as well tell people what we're talking about. So I did this piece in the newsletter saying, the way the Mark Milley story was played, the story comes out of the Bob Woodward book, was Milley steps in and keeps an unstable Trump from starting a war with China. Whereas if you look at some of the things that had actually created the tension with China and ostensibly some concern on China's part that Milley was subduing with his reassurances, some of them weren't Trump's instability. It had to do with a military exercise that involved like the mock invasion of an island, and it was an American island, but they made it pretty clear. We made it pretty clear that we had in mind an island that China might want to defend, and one way we made that clear was that people participating in the exercise had this shoulder patch that had a map of China. There were these drones that were central to the exercise, a certain type of drone. Shoulder patch had them flying over a map of China with, first of all, an actual image of the Grim Reaper because it's called the Reaper drone, but also there was a crosshairs on the center of China. Okay. So there was a picture of this in Air Force magazine. This gets back to China. And this is like, just a month or two before Mark Milley's first call reassuring China, right? Which is late October. And, this starts getting, play in China's press in late September. These exercises are just winding up. These shoulder patches hit the Chinese, media, including both official, House Communist Party, House organs, and, like the South China Morning Post, which sometimes does reflect Beijing's perspective, even though it's nominally run by, independently. And then, what's really interesting here in terms of this thesis that this had a lot to do with the China concern that Milley was subduing, is like one day before the first Milley phone call. So the Milley phone call comes like October 30th to 31st. And it is right before the election, and that's the thing the Post played up. The day before that, the Chinese press is saying, okay, concerns about this war, concerns that were stoked by this shoulder patch, are over because the Secretary of Defense has called China and reassured us. Okay. Now, this is the day before Milley's first phone call. Okay.
Right.
So first of all, that reinforces the idea that Woodward was over dramatizing this thing. Milley actually had the full support of the Secretary of Defense. He wasn't going rogue. But secondly, the Secretary of Defense did the work. Milley's phone call was more like a follow-up. Hey, you guys okay? Is everything, it's like the tensions were officially declared subdued in the Chinese press the day before Milley's first phone call.
So that makes it even more bizarre that he gave them a heads up, promised to give them a heads up, which I doubt the Secretary of Defense
I'm not even sure which
authorized.
phone call that was. Was that the January 6th phone call or this October?
I don't know. That's a good question.
That may have been the later one. Now, I grant you the later one, there may have been more exclusively Trump-related concern on China's part. I don't know. But just looking at what happened, the part that I described in last Monday's Nonzero newsletter, is enough to tell you, I think, two things. A, predictably, the whole Woodward story was overblown. It wasn't Milley going rogue. And B, it was overblown in the sense that this wasn't just another resistance morality play where, Milley heroically or anybody heroically steps in and saves us from Trump. Yeah, maybe they were partly saving us from Trump, but there's also the question of whether just the defense establishment with these exercises and so on and with whoever the hell thought up this shoulder patch are needlessly,
how many
people.
patches are there? I mean, my guess is that every branch of the armed services that's in this operation has a separate patch. So there are probably multiple patches, and I doubt that they're all reviewed by Milley. They're probably...
an interesting... one thing I said is, if whoever decided on this patch doesn't understand that in the modern environment, and this is very different from 20 years ago, but in the modern environment, if you put a patch on a soldier's shoulder that has crosshairs on China, that is trolling China because it's probably going to get around. This wasn't true 20 years ago, but it's probably going to get to them now. And if you don't know that, you shouldn't be choosing patches. Somebody else should.
So cancel culture is extended to patches now. We're going to have tame, insipid PC patches that don't offend anybody.
I don't think that's the way to look at it. I think the way to look at it is that, because of social media and the pervasiveness of cameras and everything, there's a broader array of stuff that amounts to communication with foreign countries, right? They're going to react to a patch like that. It's just that 20 years ago, they wouldn't have found out about it.
It reminds me of the incident at the beginning of Gulf War I when we stationed our troops in Saudi Arabia there was a lot of concern that we would be sensitive to local mores and customs. And the first song they played on the radio was The Clash's Rock the Casbah.
Yeah.
And at the time, I thought it was a great thing. Here we were. If these people want us to help them, fuck them, they're going to have to hear Rock the Casbah. And then it turned out, of course, that our presence there was what so pissed off Osama bin Laden. And maybe it wasn't the most diplomatic thing to play Rock the Casbah.
That might have been my view at the time, even, Mickey.
It was? Did you even know it was happening?
I remember you and I having this conversation. It was a little after the fact. It was years after the fact, but you were still kind of cheerleading it, and I was not.
Okay. Well, anyway, it was a similar mistake, although I guess they care more about the morale of the troops than they care, and you're saying they should care less about the morale of the troops and more about...
No, I didn't say that. I mean, look, if you've got troops who can't get up in the morning unless they have a shoulder patch with some country, crosshairs on some country, get new troops. I mean, come on.
Well, it obviously helps. That's why they have them. That's why they have these challenge coins, which is another thing that's going to get you in trouble.
Actually, no. I mean, one theory I came up with, and there's some evidence for this. This is a speculative theory, but if you ask what was this patch for, apparently, I mean, this is crazy, but this drone is like an endangered species because it's a kind of old drone.
Right. And
apparently you have these people who are supporters of this drone, which no doubt includes the company that makes it. And apparently it sounds as if part of the idea behind this whole exercise was to prove that this drone can be useful as we pivot to Asia. It can be useful if we attack an island, and there's some reason to think that maybe that's where the shoulder patch came from, is the military-industrial complex. And I know there are people who will read my piece and say what you said. Oh, does everything have to be PC? But I'm sorry.
That was a joke, Bob.
No, but there will be reaction like that, right? It is like, oh, come on. Do we all have to spend all our time worrying what's going to annoy the Chinese? But I mean, look, let's look at it this way. If we caught wind of Chinese soldiers wearing a shoulder patch that had a map of America with a crosshair on Kansas, what do you think the average Republican congressman would do about that? Like, no big deal? No, it would be 24/7 for about a week on Fox News.
Republicans actually have to think that crosshairs are harmless because of the Gabby Giffords crosshair.
That would be an uncharacteristic display of logical consistency on their part. You're referring to the fact that Sarah Palin, right, before Gabby Gifford was shot, Sarah Palin had some kind of a poster with crosshairs on certain congressional districts, right?
Yes.
Including Gabby Gifford's.
Yes. So it's just a harmless metaphor.
Okay, I'll calm down now if I know that you're on my side. That's all I want, Mickey.
I have one more reasonably large topic. We have time for that, right?
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is your buddy Ezra Klein, your guru, your mentor.
He is a god among men. Did I mention that Ezra Klein is a god among men, Mickey? Did I?
Yeah, okay.
I try to say that every week.
Who I have the utmost respect for, as you know. He wrote a column which everybody sort of liked called Supply Side Liberalism. And it was good. It was a good column. It said basically instead of just worrying about redistribution, we have to do more. We have to also change the provision of goods that are available to the people to whom this income is redistributed. As a society, we want new goods. That dovetails with the administration's fixation on worrying about inflation. So if you can argue that this big bloated package is going to increase supply in a way that will lower inflation, that will presumably make it more palatable. But Klein is talking about more things than that. He cites what I haven't read, but what sounds like a very good left-wing essay about how, as a society, we have to reach for great things, reach for AI, cures, all sorts of science fiction things. And I think that's right. And I think that would also make life more meaningful for people if they thought there was some larger goal they were going toward. But then, and of course, the administration adopted it, perhaps because it is a talking point of the administration. The economist...
Wait, the administration adopted what?
The economist Jared Bernstein wrote a blog post where he cited Ezra's article and said, that's right, we're going to lower inflation because we're going to have these going to be good supply side things are happening in this bill. And the problem is when you look down the list of what the things are in the bill and are they supply side, the Klein thesis doesn't do so well. Okay, transportation, infrastructure, hard infrastructure, will give that to them. That increases the productive capacity of society, thereby removing bottlenecks and letting us produce more, lowering the risk of inflation. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Housing, Democrats want more supply. They want to remove exclusionary zoning, but that's in the bill, not in the bill. So it's a problem for Klein because it's not in the bill. Healthcare. Well, Klein says, well, we want to keep the drugs coming. So, it's not, we still wanted to control prices. Normally the prices are high prices, what would keep the drugs coming. He wants to control prices and devise new policies to increase the supply of drugs. Well, that's great. You can always say, hey, I'm going to fuck things up, but I'm going to come up with new policies. Well, what are these new policies? It turns out they're prizes for people who create drugs, that society wants. Well, how about the prizes? You make $1 billion. I mean, that's a pretty good tried and true prize. So it's not clear that Klein is going to increase supply of drugs the way he claims to. Bernie Sanders has some plan where we control prices so they don't get rewarded by profits. They
Right.
get rewarded by these prizes that the
Well, that
government
kind of
gives
makes sense. I mean, you give a huge prize to a person, but then there's no patent protection. That would lower prices unless the prize is like $50 billion. I mean, that makes sense.
Right, but assuming the patent protection isn't the lure that lets them develop the drug in the first place.
Well, no, but
it's very socialistic. It's basically saying we don't trust the market. We trust the government giving awards and prizes, and I would say that thesis is unproven.
Well, maybe so, but in theory, if you give prizes as the incentive but take away the patent protection, that could save money. Sure. I mean, lower the overall amount spent on the drug.
But can it save money at the same time as it stimulates as much new drug production? That's what it has to eliminate things like copycat drugs and all the things I think the market now wastes resources on, and still, it seems to me that is the question is partly does a reward provided by the patent system currently provide more incentive than is necessary? I think it does. I think a good example is these vaccines. Pfizer and Moderna have already made so much money that the investment made sense. They've gotten enough positive reinforcement to keep companies looking for life-saving vaccines, and yet they're going to get a lot more. And yet they're going to get a lot more, which is more than they needed for incentive. I'm not going to be able to articulate this, but Mike Kinsley wrote a very good essay at Slate, which nobody reads anymore. This article nobody reads anymore. It's very hard to find. He pointed out the problem when the marginal cost of something like a pill is virtually zero. Mm-hmm. You really don't know where to put the price, because in theory,
unless you have a
economic
monopoly,
theory, the marginal cost increases as scale ramps up at some point, and that's where you put the price. But realistic with a pill, it never increases. So you could price it at $10, you could price it at $100, but if you drive it down, if you let us get the Canadian rate, okay, it will drive it down so low that it basically, which is what Bernie Sanders and Ezra Klein and the Democrats want to do, the progressive Democrats, give us the same rate Canada gets. That drives it so low that it really does deprive the company of profits.
I mean, I'm not sure I accept his premise. Depends on what exactly he said. If you have a monopoly by virtue of patent, you do know where to put the price. It's wherever maximizes your annual profit, and you don't have to worry about competition. There is such thing as too high, but you find out what it is, and that's where you have to price.
Presumably, the We Pay the Canada price applies to drugs that have patent protection, so you can't set the price wherever you want. Medicare will first, even without the Canada thing, if you let Medicare negotiate, they will negotiate it even if you have the patent down so low that you won't be able to make enough profit. But the Canada thing is sort of worse because it sort of says you can't go above this low rate that we give Canada. So it's not clear that the drug thing will increase supply. It's not clear that their health plans are going to bend the curve and make things cheaper. It's not clear that the electric car plans are going to do any more than jump in front of the parade. The country's already shifting to electric cars. So the government's like jumping in front and saying, see, we're incentivizing it. Well, I don't know how much good that does you, but there are other things in the bill that actually hurt supply.
Okay, just quickly, the government did help the electric car industry gotten to where it's gotten. There's been subsidies for almost every electric car that's sold.
Right. Do we need any more is the question.
I don't know.
Actually,
I'm not ready to buy one.
Tesla got initial subsidies, but I think it's free of them now.
Well, Tesla exhausted, I think, reached its limit, but new car, the ones that are just getting into the market get to sell as many cars, I think, as Tesla sold with subsidies. So
but
it's going to keep coming for a long time.
There may be some problem with adoption of electric cars that I'm not aware of, but basically the whole industry is moving like a glacier toward electric cars. It's like unstoppable at this point.
If it's moving like a glacier, I think the velocity could be increased. I'm not sure that's the metaphor you want, Mickey.
That's probably good criticism.
More like a juggernaut. You want a juggernaut.
A tidal wave, a tsunami.
A tsunami, yes.
Anyway, parental leave takes workers out of the workforce. How does that increase productive capacity? It doesn't. It hurts productive capacity. The child tax credit, which Ezra Klein admits is on a demand side, solution, not a supply side solution, has work disincentive effects. So that takes workers out of the workforce. That's an anti-supply problem. Their daycare plan, which is basically just daycare vouchers or daycare block grants, is not doing anything to help the supply of daycare, help improve the efficiency of daycare. Their only argument, which is not a terrible one, is it frees up the caretakers it frees up the parents to go to work. So
I would think daycare in principle reduces per household costs for child rearing, and in that way does free up productive capacity.
I think that's a disputed point, but during welfare reform, I agreed with that. So yes.
So far it's Ezra 2 and maybe 3 if you take my view of the healthcare thing. No, he's not doing that badly. There's a reason they call him a god among men, Mickey.
He's bad on parental leave. The daycare thing, which Jared Bernstein really emphasizes, is not any sort of structural improvement in the daycare industry. It's just pouring money in out the old channels. Education, there's an argument that drives up the price. It's not clear that they're doing anything. They're subsidizing community college. In regular college, that just drove up the price. So people have to take out these huge loans. Well, isn't it going to do the same thing with community college?
You could argue that community college has a bigger payoff in terms of, employment and equipping people with vocation relevant skills.
Yeah. You can say that.
I just said it.
Climate change, I think they actually are. I know nothing about climate change. I accept that they're actually trying for innovative, earth-changing solutions. Job training is really a blob, Bob. We've been funding job training for years. We're still having the same fucking debates that we had 30 years ago when I looked at it. We need to get the employers involved so they're training for the right jobs. And it's exactly, there seems to be absolutely no progress made in 30 years. And is the government's return on job training actually any good? I sort of think no. So I don't know. It seems like a very mixed picture, Bob.
I don't know. I thought by my accounting rules, Ezra did better than by yours.
What ones does he win? Does he win healthcare? No,
he may win healthcare. He may win child.
He may win them all, but may is not good enough here.
But he has a stronger case in those two categories than you acknowledged.
I did. Well, I don't think he had a very good strong
there
case
is a reason they say.
In healthcare, healthcare is expensive. We're going to have more and more treatments that are more and more expensive, and ultimately we're just going to have to pay for them.
Well, that's just life, but that's going to happen to some extent in any event. The question is, under which system does it happen more? Look, it is a fact that just straight up socialized medicine, not that anybody's actually proposing that, but true universal health care, and not that anybody's proposing that, but moving in those directions does tend to reduce medical costs. Now, there's a price paid for that in terms of the accessibility of the more exotic treatments, but
his whole thrust is
lower costs. It is anti-inflation.
His whole thrust is I'm citing this visionary leftist who says we want the exotic treatments, we need the new treatments, we need the expensive treatments. So you're saying he's going to cut them out. Well, that contradicts what he's saying.
But there is a separate, but the thing about giving prizes for drug research is a separate analytically separate issue. And you can imagine that reducing costs relative to the current system of patent protection. I mean, look, Mickey, the length of patents was determined by Congress when? What are the chances that it's like the optimal system in any sense? It came from Congress. It's almost certainly fucked up.
None of these people seem to mention patents. Maybe there's something in the bill that I don't know about.
Well, I'm just going by your account. I assume that the giving of prizes would be a replacement.
He doesn't mention patents. Bernstein doesn't mention patents.
Well, then
maybe they're all scared to touch patents because they know the lobbying is too strong there.
Well, the way I can see this working to lower costs is you replace patent protection, or maybe you reduce the length of patent protection and throw in these prizes or something.
How about if you invent a new drug, the leaf blowers will turn off and you'll be able to hear yourself think?
You sure those leaf blowers aren't in your head, Mickey?
No, I'm not sure. That's the problem. Ever since I drove
could be COVID. By the way, the case numbers, there's finally just the last couple of days evidence that the deaths could be plateauing and that the case numbers could be actually declining, which would be good.
I agree. It seems the decline seems to have been going on too long for it just to be Florida. Anyway, it's going down here in California, so that's all I care about.
Okay. Now, meanwhile, though, I'm regretting that I'm a Pfizer guy because I'm not old enough. I'm not quite old enough for the booster, but it's turning out. Did you get Moderna?
I got Moderna, and not only does Moderna turn out to have more staying power, but the booster shot is only half the dose of the regular shot, according to the president of Moderna. So that slightly alleviates my worry that it's going to turn me into a paralytic arthritic case because I have these side effects, what I think are side effects of pain in my joints. I'll take a half a dose before I'll take another dose.
What was I going to say? I was going to say something. You know, that guy, that Malone guy who was the closest thing to a credentialed person who was sounding alarms about the vaccine, about side effects. He said months ago that he had gotten Moderna and wished he had gotten Pfizer if he had thought through the side effects more clearly. I assume these are two sides of the same coin. In other words, Moderna sends out more shit to more parts of your body, and that's what scared him. But that's why, presumably, it lasts longer. I don't
know, but
yeah.
The president of Moderna also said there's going to be enough vaccine to vaccinate the whole planet soon.
Well, they better hurry. This is another case where they should have on emergency grounds reduced the patent protection a while ago. But the other thing I think they're going to discover, I think they're kind of concluding, is that with Pfizer, the second shot should have come significantly later. And all you had to do, the funny thing is, all you had to do is look at the trial data to conclude that. I mean, the effects were pretty dramatic, like, a couple of weeks after the first shot. It was clear. The case rate suddenly departed from the control group's case rate. They're both going up. And as I recall, after 10 days, 2 weeks, this is after one Pfizer shot, if I'm recalling correctly, the case rate just starts leveling off for the vaccination group, keeps going up for the control group. So, what happened apparently is both Moderna and Pfizer wanted to be on the safe side when they did their trials, wanted to make sure they could show an effect. So they both said, let's make it a 2-vaccine shot. Johnson & Johnson didn't say that, okay? So Johnson & Johnson did their trials with 1, and Pfizer and Moderna did their trials with 2, and with a specific interval, I guess 3 weeks or something in the case of Pfizer. And then they're totally locked into that. So Johnson & Johnson can't say, even though their efficacy rate looks lower, mainly just because they only did 1 shot, J&J can't now say, well, wait, we've decided it's a 2-shot vaccine. Because no, that's not how you did your trials. Yeah. And it's a screwed up system, and it gets back to the fact that they don't permit challenge trials, which I won't get into.
Good. Anyway, give me my point that parental leave is not a supply-side liberalism. It's demand-side liberalism that fucks up the supply side, because 12 weeks of parental leave a year, Bob, is a lot of parental leave.
Well, you got to throw in the externality. Here's the argument, their
kids right. Won't get as sick, so the long term they'll spend less time with the kid. And what's the argument? No,
it's that their kids will not feel loved, and then later, 10 years later, to compensate for that, they'll go buy a bunch of shit and drive up inflation. They'll be like buying shit 10 years later. That's it. So it's anti-inflationary. parental leave is anti-inflationary because you don't produce these psychologically damaged kids who overspend to overcompensate for the feeling of insecurity. I assume that's what Ezra said.
I think you've gone deep, Bob.
Okay. Anyway, on balance, I think the supply side thing is, it survived your scrutiny better than you might think.
And maybe daycare.
Maybe daycare, maybe drugs, which would be victory, I think. Those three would mean Ezra 3, Mickey 2.
There's much higher percentage chance that it'll fuck up drugs than it'll help drugs.
So now we have been talking for an hour, Mickey. More than an hour.
So we're not going to get to Hunter Biden. Damn it.
Well, that's perfect Parrot Room stuff. Now,
or Jake Sullivan. That's the shocking one. Well,
you're going to have to explain that one to me. Now first of all, let me write this down. So on Hunter, are you talking about the Glenn Greenwald piece?
Jake Sullivan is exposed to prosecution by Mr. Durham. He may have lied to Congress.
Ooh, that would be great. I know that I don't wish any human ill, but well, he's part of the blob.
It's not the sort of crime that ordinarily would be prosecuted, but Durham may be a man on a mission.
Okay, so we'll talk about that. But then there is the Hunter Biden. You didn't read the Glenn Greenwald piece about Hunter Biden?
You know, do I have time to read a Glenn Greenwald piece? I would still be reading it.
Well, if somebody will tell you where
it's a classic case of the Substack where the guy doesn't know how to stop writing.
It's not the stopping. It's the problem. And it's not strictly speaking the burying of the lead, because the lead is in the headline. It's just that you don't know how many paragraphs down the lead is going to be. That is the Substack phenomenon. That the lead is not buried in the old-fashioned sense. It's not like the reporter doesn't know what the lead is. They just don't feel a reason to let you discover it with less than an hour's reading.
You have to learn their whole life story before you get to the lead.
With Glenn, it's not life story.
I'm sure Greenwald was right. I accept that he was right. I don't have to read his piece. There were two horrible examples of that. One is there's a long attack on Karl Rove, which sounds great, called the Notorious PIG that Ann Coulter was hyping. I had read 2,000 words. I hadn't gotten to the fucking nut paragraph. I was still on this guy's early childhood, adolescent history or something. Mm. So I just gave up. And the second thing was, there's actually in the Washington Post, there's I think a piece about how new leaks reveal embarrassing details about Proud Boys. Okay. I did more than skim. I did a deep skim. I actually looked at every paragraph to try to find what the embarrassing details were. And I couldn't, after 40 paragraphs, I hadn't gotten to any embarrassing details yet. Okay. Give me a break. This is the Substack thing bleeding over into mainstream media.
I want to talk about other aspects of Substack in the Parrot Room. So I'm circling that. I think there's a, how should I put this? Well, I want to do some compare and contrast between Substack and Patreon, and along some dimensions, I think Patreon comes out better.
Okay.
As far as ways to go. I want maybe I should write this in my Substack newsletter.
Maybe what? Sorry, the leaf blowers are on again.
I said maybe I should write this in my Substack newsletter, but maybe not yet. I'll vet it with you. I also want to ask you about the next thing I'm going to write in my newsletter. It's about the blob. It has a little to do with that General Assembly speech. It has a little to do with Ben Rhodes. I need guidance here.
That's true about every post you write.
That I need guidance? No, or that it's about those three things?
Blob and
well, that's the other question. Have I been doing too much foreign policy lately? It seems like a very fluid...
I thought that's what your Substack was about.
No,
you write about other things?
No, I mean, there's a lot of stuff on kind of the psychology of tribalism, cognitive biases, and so on. It's just that lately it seemed like a very fluid moment foreign policy-wise, starting with Afghanistan.
Yeah, so I would just drop it in a few months.
Oh, also, our the Parrot Room campaign to get you to use a dating app continues. Some of the commenters, I think, have been very obliging in
They've
suggesting...
been very generous, and I think I want to call a halt to it, but we can talk about that in the Parrot Room.
Oh, Mickey.
Nobody wants to be Leroy in that horrible...
Leroy Boy, You're My Friend in that song?
That shitty song.
That is a bad song.
Todd
I would not wish
Rundgren.
that on my worst enemy.
A shitty character and a shitty song. You jumped the shark with Todd Rundgren, boy. That's all I'm saying.
Well, there's also... there's another... I want to discuss Todd Rundgren because it's an odd case of really super annoying songs combined with pretty good songs.
Okay.
Todd Rundgren.
That's not odd at all. That's the usual fare. There's a couple of new minor Epstein angles. There's a new potentially breakthrough 8chan conspiracy that I only got a glimpse of. I haven't had a chance to investigate it.
8chan?
8chan is 4chan for people who think 4chan is too tame.
Remind me to have
Jennifer
them over.
Rubin. There's replacement theory, the mere discussion of which will get me into terminal trouble.
No, you can discuss it. It's your endorsement of it that I think is kind of the hot
If you
button
say
here.
anything other than that it's a horrible racist thing that nobody ever should say, you're in trouble.
Well, it depends on the version of it.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that.
So we're going to talk about replacement theory. That is... no.
And I want to praise... I want to draw a sharp distinction between my hero, Walter Shapiro, and your hero, Ezra Klein.
What, is Walter not a god among men? Is that what you're saying?
No, I said he's my hero.
No, I know, but that would be a distinction. If he's not a god among men, you've got your distinction, and we can just move on to something else.
They're both gods among men, but
okay.
there's a contrast to be made, which we will make in the Parrot Room.
In the Parrot Room, people got to pay for that one.
I guess I'm going to annoy people when I say that.
Why? No,
because it's a bad habit to tease things like that.
Well, I want to get into that in the context of Substack newsletters, teasing, the propriety of teasing.
It's better than offering Blogging Heads Plus, where we send you a tote bag and
much better
pair of
Although
shorts.
we could tease that. It's like you got to pay to find out what the tote bag says. Something like that.
The tote bag left some bullshit about intrusive inspections.
Unprecedentedly intrusive inspections.
Yeah.
And then I want to quickly mention, I listened to an interview with Michael Wolff by Andrew Sullivan, and some things he said about Trump are worth running by you. About the exact nature of Trump's craziness. And his conviction that Trump is going to run and that. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff. I don't think I'm going to
disagree with him there, but anyway, okay.
That's a lot of stuff.
He knows more about Trump than I do.
So, yeah, but I'm not sure about his judgment, Michael Wolff's judgment. We can talk about that maybe. Also, I've decided maybe he's not a bad person. I had a bad experience with him, but then it dawned on me, maybe he just doesn't like me. That could be.
I had a bad experience with him too.
Or maybe he just doesn't like you and me.
But then he seemed to like me, so I like him now.
So he just doesn't like me. So maybe he just doesn't like me. That's what I'm back to my original hypothesis.
He seemed to have the attitude toward the truth that was portrayed on Saturday Night Live, which is, were you not amused?
Right. That's what worries me about him.
Yeah.
Okay. So we will see folks who go to the Parrot Room at patreon.com/Parrot Room in the Parrot Room. Other things people could do to win our enduring and undying gratitude would be smash the like button on YouTube, rate and review The Wright Show. Can you think of anything else, Mickey? Subscribe to Kausfiles, the Mickey Kaus newsletter. Follow us on Twitter. Rate us,
which is free.
Follow us on Instagram.
Yeah.
No, Mickey, we're not on Instagram. No, the answer is no on Instagram. No.
Write your congressman and oppose the refundable child tax credit.
I'm afraid I can't support you on that. But
You're
we will
for the refundable child tax credit? Seriously?
Yeah, I think. The one you're against? If you're against it, I'm for it, sure.
You liked welfare? Weren't you an editor of the New Republic during welfare reform?
I am less convinced than you are that Clinton's brief experiment with workfare was a big success. In any event.
Work went up, child poverty went down?
I don't know. I don't remember you always singing this tune. I thought you once acknowledged that the results were more ambiguous. But
well,
maybe
things. I thought states would initiate guaranteed job programs, and the governors not only didn't do that, they just generally fell down on the job. That part didn't work.
Now that reminds me, for reasons I don't understand, that our commenters a few weeks ago made a couple of interesting arguments about abortion that I should hearken back to. I didn't. I'm gonna try to go find those comments. Some commenters. There's at least one thing I hadn't heard.
I should just let Sean Gibby write my dating profile for me. That would.
Well, she wrote it, and I can't believe. No, and I'm gonna talk you into using it, man.
What? It was like must love dogs or something.
I take back what I said about the Todd Run. I didn't mean to bring that song into your consciousness. That was
no, it's
my
too
bad.
late now. Can't unhear it.
We gotta get you.
Okay.
All right. See you in the Parrot room.
See ya.
Okay.